This week's 1044 is brought to you by Chevron Delo 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash.
While drivers are mostly opposed to driver-facing cameras, opportunities do exist with the technology.
You're watching CCJ's 1044, a weekly webisode that brings you the latest trucking industry news and updates from the editors of CCJ. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you'll never miss an installment of 1044. Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Jason Cannon, and my co-host, as always, right through there is Matt Cole. It's no secret in trucking that most drivers are not big fans of having a driver-facing camera in the cab. Their argument, and it's a valid one, is that the truck is where they live, and they feel like their privacy is being invaded by having a camera pointed at them.
New research released in April by the American Transportation Research Institute dove into the issue of driver-facing cameras and how they are perceived not only by drivers, but by legal experts and insurers as well. Joining us again on the 1044 is Alex Leslie, a research associate with ATRI, who talks about how ATRI conducted the study and what they found are the issues with, as well as some opportunities for, driver-facing cameras.
Our goal really was to look for areas of agreement and potential compromise among the key industry stakeholders on driver-facing cameras. So that involved surveys of drivers, over 2,000 of them, as well as legal experts, lawyers, and insurance experts as well. There's a lot of different carriers out there with a lot of different policies and a lot of different camera vendors. We were looking for where does that agreement exist? Where is the possibility for compromise? And ultimately, if a carrier is going to adopt driver-facing cameras, what are the ways that they can do so to maximize safety and driver approval?
When conducting surveys about these cameras, ATRI looked at 4 different areas: safety, litigation, privacy, and overall approval. Now, among drivers, unsurprisingly, privacy scored the lowest of the 4 areas.
We tracked sort of 4 key areas of opinion, basically. We asked drivers what they thought about the camera's ability to improve safety, to help in litigation, to protect privacy, and then ultimately what their overall approval rating was. And we asked them to rank those on a 0 to 10 scale. And our average overall approval among current users was, like you would expect, a bit low. It was 2.24 out of 10. Right. So that is low, and it does reflect the fact that a lot of drivers do have concerns. And of those 4 key areas, privacy was the biggest concern for them, sort of driving those low ratings. But I will say, too, that's an average. That means that, it's around 2.5 for every 3 drivers who say give it a 0 out of 10. That means 1 is giving it a 10 out of 10. And of course, there are plenty of drivers who are rating it anywhere in between there. But there is, while the average does tend low, there is a diversity of opinions out there.
Alex notes that like driver-facing cameras, road-facing cameras were also not very popular when they first came out. But driver opinion on those has turned considerably over the years. After word from 1044 sponsor Chevron Lubricants, we'll hear from Alex on some comparisons ATRI was able to draw between the 2 camera systems.
Protecting your diesel engine and its after-treatment system has traditionally been a double-edged sword. The same engine oil that is so essential to protecting your engine's internal parts is also responsible for 90% of the ash that is clogging up your DPF and upping your fuel and maintenance costs. Outdated industry thinking still sees a trade-off between engine and emission system protection, and Chevron was tired of it. So they spent a decade of R&D developing a no-compromise formulation. Chevron Lubricants developed a new ultra-low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by a whopping 60%, which reduces the rate of DPF clogging and extends DPF service life by 2.5 times. And just think what you can do with all the MPGs you're going to add from cutting your number of regens. But Delo 600 ADF isn't just about aftertreatment. It provides complete protection, extending drain intervals by preventing oil breakdown. Before, you had to choose between protecting your engine or your aftertreatment system, and now you don't. 600 ADF from Delo with OmniMax technology, it's time to kick some ash.
When road-facing cameras were first introduced, driver opinions of them were quite low. To begin with, any kind of camera was a big, question mark. And since then, driver opinions of road-facing cameras have been on the rise as they've become more widely used. And as drivers have experienced the positive benefits, not just for carriers, but for themselves, that come out of road-facing cameras. So they tended to score much higher on average in all of those, again, those four key areas: safety, litigation, privacy, and overall approval. Though drivers did still have some privacy concerns with road-facing cameras even. That was their lowest score for both camera types. I think there's a couple takeaways there. There are a number of reasons why drivers prefer road-facing cameras right now. Of course, it's not facing inward to the cab. But it does show, I think, that with well-developed policies and with policies that really keep driver concerns in mind, there is a path forward for, driver-facing cameras to be implemented in a way that can meet driver concerns while also serving some of the benefits that we get out of cameras.
One key finding of ATRI's research was that drivers who have had cameras in their trucks, whether it's inward-facing or outward-facing, rated cameras higher than those who have not had any experience with the cameras at all.
One of the key parts of this report that we wanted to dig into was, okay, when there are drivers who think more highly of driver-facing cameras, why is that the case? What are the either, maybe their background or their experience or the kind of operation they work in that leads them to that more positive opinion? And the first thing we found, like you said, is that current users rate the cameras more than twice as high as drivers who have never used them. So simply having any experience whatsoever already, increases that. Another key factor there was event-based cameras that trigger when there's some kind of event like a sudden braking or a sudden swerve versus continuously reporting cameras. Those event-based cameras tended to get rated higher by drivers by about 22%. And then another factor we found was that, again, when drivers have experience with potential benefits to themselves, those ratings go up as well. So we asked drivers about what kind of preventative safety measures their footage was used for. So we tracked ongoing driver coaching, initial driver training, and then footage being used to develop safety programs more broadly. And what we found is that carriers that added one or two of those, driver opinions went up. And when carriers were using footage for all three of those areas of preventative safety, driver opinions went up by 87%, which again makes sense, right? If drivers see a benefit to them, if drivers are actually seeing what that footage looks like and having the opportunity to actually work with it in a positive, productive way, their opinions, go up considerably.
As Alex mentioned, drivers rated event-based recording cameras higher than continuously recording cameras. But what did the legal experts think?
One of the things about this research that I was most struck by was how much agreement there is among drivers, legal experts, and insurance experts on what the concerns are with driver-facing cameras, but also what the preferences are. And one of those areas was for event-based cameras. So we found that I believe it's 83% of legal experts that we surveyed said that they also prefer event-based cameras. And for them, it's for some of the same reasons, in fact, is why drivers prefer them. Lawyers are really concerned about excess footage that plaintiff attorneys can maybe comb through and find little behaviors here and there that maybe weren't even necessarily related to the crash, but that could be used to try to sway a jury in court. And they're also concerned about what you sometimes hear called overcoaching, which is, the kind of coaching that identifies, every time a driver, turns the dial on the radio or something like that. Drivers don't like that. They call it nitpicking or other things. Fault finding is another phrase for it. But the reason why the lawyers don't like it is because they say it creates this record of all these issues when in fact they're not really issues. They're minor events. And so that's the kind of thing that can be used negatively by plaintiffs in litigation as well.
As I mentioned before, privacy is almost always what we hear as the reason drivers don't want a driver-facing camera. Alex says ATRI's research found that to be more than just anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, our privacy findings really weren't that surprising. Again, if you talk to drivers, you've heard a lot of the things that we heard on the subject of privacy. It's especially a concern among drivers who, they're doing long haul. Their truck is not just their workplace, but it's also their home. And it is especially a concern among women in the industry. Among our respondents to this survey, women rated privacy 34% lower than males, which is to say they were that much more concerned about privacy. There are a number of different reasons. Women certainly, there are instances where they've experienced unwanted comments about their appearance, or even comments that fall under the umbrella of sexual harassment. Again, as an industry, that's something that we need to be very conscious of for any carrier who's looking at implementing driver-facing cameras. We asked drivers and insurers and lawyers as well, who should have access to footage? And everyone agreed that the most important person to have access was the safety director. But after that, generally, everyone kind of agreed that really it should be limited as much as possible to just safety directors having access to that footage. Again, to try to limit who actually sees it, limit potential issues with privacy. And we have a number of interesting suggestions from drivers about further steps that carriers can take to improve privacy protection.
Despite drivers' low opinions of driver-facing cameras, Atri did hear some suggestions from drivers during his research about what might make them more comfortable with the cameras.
The biggest thing is that they want some of those protections involved. So one of the biggest suggestions we heard was that the camera should be off when the truck is not moving. So that includes, sometimes, of course, drivers got to keep the truck running, whether that's for climate control for the cab or for the cargo. And so they want the cameras to not be recording even when the truck is, maybe still running, but stopped or in park. Another big factor is, again, I mentioned how when carriers are able to use footage for preventative safety, like coaching, driver opinions tend to go up. But that said, drivers also had a lot of good suggestions for how to improve coaching. Because if coaching is done poorly, or if it's done in a way that causes anxiety or negativity, it can be, actually counterproductive. So drivers suggested things like less nitpicking or less fault finding. They suggested less punitive use of footage, right? To keep the use of footage as positive as possible, right? As a way to reward good driving rather than, constantly as a negative factor. And that really is, I think, one of the biggest areas for potential improvement in this carrier-driver relationship over driver-facing cameras. Cameras have the potential ability to really showcase driver skills, driver success, drivers out there doing good work, not just staying safe themselves, but avoiding some of the nonsense that happens on the road around them that they aren't causing but have to react to. That is when a carrier can use a camera to create a more positive environment, and an environment that, again, recognizes and celebrates driver skill while protecting privacy. That really is, that really is, I think, the most positive pathway.
For fleets that are considering bringing on driver-facing cameras, Alex says there's several factors carriers should consider before springing them on their drivers.
I would say, first of all, that every carrier is different, and that different drivers have different perspectives and needs too. So, a carrier looking at driver-facing cameras is going to have to think about what do their operations look like. Also, what does their company culture look like? Driver-facing cameras are going to fit with certain carriers better than others, I think. The second thing I'd say is that, that driver carrier relationship is important, right? If there's trust there to begin with, if that relationship is already strong, then driver facing cameras are going to seem like a way to, continue to strengthen the company as a whole, drivers, management, everyone. If that relationship is shaky, then that's the case where then, adding in a camera potentially seems like, now they're, another way they're trying to watch me or they're trying to get me. That relationship happens before the camera, and then it continues after the camera if a carrier does choose to add them. And so, our report, we really tried to look at, what are those different pathways? What are those different potential policies that a carrier could consider in order to try to, again, not just improve safety, but also improve approval. And the exact choices that a carrier makes, they're going to differ from carrier to carrier. But we tried to sort of lay out what a number of those would be. And even for carriers who, maybe they've decided they aren't going to use driver-facing cameras, it's important even for those carriers to know that this is a trend that's happening. Like it or not, there are other fleets that are adopting this. And so going forward, fleets that decide not to adopt them are going to have to know how to respond. For example, when they end up in court and when, being able to prepare themselves for the questions from the plaintiff bar, for example.
That's it for this week's 1044. You can read more on ccjdigital.com. While you're there, sign up for our newsletter and stay up to date on the latest in trucking industry news and trends. If you have any questions or feedback, please let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you can catch us again next week.